You guys, I have to tell you about today's sponsor, the Game Time Ticket app. How exciting would it be to attend a Major League Baseball game this summer? Game Time is the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch, with killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seats, and their lowest price guaranteed. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. One of my favorite features within this app is the views from your seats feature. This allows you and shows you how close you're getting to the action before you buy your ticket to the event you're trying to go to. If you guys go over, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS, you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Well, we have a special guest on today's podcast. Seems like you're a regular, and I love it. James Edwards III from The Athletic. James, welcome back to the show. How are you, man?
Doing well. Tired. Been a long week. Got a long week ahead, but yeah, man, can't complain. Blessed and appreciate you having me on.
For sure. So I want people to know that they can go check out your podcast, The Detroit Players. I have it pinned in the YouTube chat. I also have it pinned in the description so people can check out your podcast with Vinny.
Appreciate it.
Definitely really good podcast. Check it out if you guys haven't already. But I want to get into this podcast, obviously. And the Pistons decided to make a head coaching hire, and it's JB Bickerstaff. So I kind of wanted to get your perspective on this hire. What did you think of this hire? And if there were any, candidates, if you had heard anything, like who were maybe like the final two or final three that did eventually to get the job?
Yeah, answer the last part first. I got wind that JB was likely to get the job on Saturday night. It still wasn't finalized. I think they did that stuff this morning, and obviously it came out. To my knowledge, it was between him and Sean Sweeney as the finalists. JB, I think, checked a lot of boxes that Langdon was looking for in terms of experience, leadership qualities, and has had experience molding a young team into a cohesive roster. So I think they walked away from the process thinking JB was the best one to check all those boxes. Not surprised at all. I knew I had reported a few days ago that he was one of the three that had interviewed. I think JB's a solid coach. I was the only one to vote for him for postseason awards. I gave him a third place vote. I thought he did a great job with that roster that one had Mitchell, Garland, and Mobley all play less than 60 games. They still won 48. They got out to a rocky start and still found a way to win 48 and even made it to the second round of the playoffs. So, yes, he's similar similar to Monty and Dwayne in terms of a guy who had just got fired that the Pistons are now hired, but I think he's only 45 years old. I know people are familiar with the name, but he's not older by any means. So I think it's probably in the Pistons' eyes a good bridge between the young and the new, or the old and the new, and somebody who has had success recently. I thought they were going to go for a first-year guy just because it was something that I thought the organization hasn't really tried, and something that I thought I'd be curious to see how they would benefit from having somebody who has not been a head coach before, let them experiment, let them bring new ideas. They'd obviously be hungry in that first opportunity. But they didn't go that way, and I understand it. I would imagine that they probably didn't want a first-year president and a first-year head coach. So they went with Bickerstaff, who I had heard was atop of Langdon's list for the last few days.
Yeah, I think, reading your articles and everything you've reported over probably the last 2 or 3 weeks, I thought, given Sweeney, Micah Nori, JB Bickerstaff, he was the one coach that had the most experience and probably the best resume. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've been on Twitter, but I mean, you know how Pistons Twitter is.
Yeah, they don't like this hire?
No.
Really? I've seen the majority of what I've seen has been pretty. They've been like, I'm fine with it. Yeah.
But I think it's 50-50. Like
Okay.
I've seen some people like give the guy a chance. You never know. There could be something there. But I also see the people saying that like, oh, this is just Dwayne Casey 2.0. Like this is just going to be a bridge coach until they find a coach. Which I don't really agree with. I think he's a good coach to your point. I think there's clear evidence of development. There's clear evidence of him being a good coach.
Yeah.
I'm not mad at this hire. I
think
thought it
he's
was a good
younger
hire.
than people think too.
Yeah, 45, I believe, right?
I think most people probably assume he's like 50s or something like that, but he's only 45.
Yeah, I mean, you're pretty deep in Pistons Twitter, like I am.
Yeah.
They don't like anything the Pistons do. It's always like the sky is falling and it's the worst possible outcome. I honestly think this is a pretty solid hire given who the candidates were, given that James Borrego decided to stay in New Orleans, which I was kind of on the Borrego train, but I understood of him wanting to stay in New Orleans, not kind of taking on like a full rebuild like what the Pistons are currently in. But I mean, honestly, I think he's a good coach, in my opinion.
No, I'm with you. I think so too. Listen, they won 44 games the last 3 years. He was kind of forced to play two bigs. This wasn't like, I don't think his brainchild. Like they acquired several big men and he found a way to make it work. And I think he maximized that team. I know the Cavaliers and their front office and their ownership think that that team should have went further than winning a game in the second round. I disagree. But yeah, I think he's done everything. I thought he did everything in Cleveland that you could do, and I thought he maximized it.
Yeah, it's to your point of like maximizing it. I mean, like they had a lot of injuries during one of his seasons. They still ended up winning like 40, 50 games with a pretty, good nucleus of core. Obviously, the Pistons, I don't know, you could try to make comparables to the, Cleveland and Detroit, but I'm not going to get into that because it's like a whole other conversation. But honestly, I like the hire at the end of the day. I thought they got the best available coach that they could, a guy that's young, that you can grow with, that has clear signs of like helping the younger guys and also is pretty good at, working with veteran players. So,
yep. I'm with
yeah, for sure. I did want to kind of go into a next segment about the NBA draft and get your thoughts of the Detroit Pistons draft, obviously selecting Ron Holland 5th overall and then Bobby Klitman in the second round.
I like the possibilities of both guys. Obviously, Ron Holland's the one we'll be emphasizing the most. You look at the draft, that class wasn't particularly good, and Ron Holland checked a lot of boxes. Uber athlete, uber competitive, can get downhill, can defend. The only thing he couldn't do is shoot. And obviously, if this was an organization that had prioritized shooting or had gotten better development from guys in terms of shooting, I don't think people would have the blowback that they did. But at the end of the day, shooting is the most teachable skill, I think, in today's game. They hired Fred Vinson for a reason. And I also think like, I got a lot of texts and messages. Is this just Ausar 2.0? And it's like, well, no, in all the good ways, yeah. Like everything you love about Ausar, this guy has too. But, and I'm not saying that he'll be better than Ausar. I actually think very highly of Ausar, but I think his base for his jump shot is easier to work with than Ausar. So there's the upside there. And to me, like, yeah, I think if you're picking 5 in a crapshoot of a draft, if you think there's a guy who's just maybe a piece of, not a piece away, but a skill away from being a legitimately scary prospect, go for it. And I like this team shooting for the moon. They don't have a lot of high-end prospects. At the end of the day, for this team to get to where they want to go, it has to be from drafting well and developing those guys. So I get that. And Bobby Klitman, again, another guy, upside swing, 6'10", can shoot it, can play both forward spots, doesn't really defend. More of a pick and pop. I think he'll translate to more of like a pick and pop 4 or a stick in the corner 4 who just knocks down threes if he ends up developing. But again, he has all the physical traits you like in the modern game, and he can already shoot. So I think they addressed a couple things here, but in terms of Holland, I like swinging for the fences as opposed to drafting Dalton Connect because they need 3-point shooting. You can go sign somebody who can shoot threes and has a track record of doing so.
Yeah, I do agree with that in terms of like addressing the shooting needs. I went back and forth with like three prospects, kind of given like Trajan Langdon's comments with his presser, and then rewatching some of his Pelican pressers. It seemed like Ron Holland or Cody Williams were kind of the archetype of wing he was looking at to possibly draft at 5, and I wasn't really upset with it, given one of my jobs is covering a lot of G League games, so I got to see Ron Holland and Modest a lot, so I wasn't too upset with the pick, given the type of season he had with the Ignite and just almost averaging 20 points a game against grown men in the G League.
Yeah.
The Bobby pick, I was kind of surprised by, because I thought Bobby was going to be a first round talent. Like, because I kind of had him like 15 to 20 in that range. I'm surprised he slipped.
Yeah, I was too. I was very surprised to see that, and I was actually surprised he was still there when the Pistons moved up. I thought he would have been gone by 37 on day 2.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was going to be Antonio Reeves personally, because he kind of checked a lot of boxes for them. But I mean, I'm not upset with the Bobby Klitman pick at all.
To my knowledge, I think one guy they like Klintman, and he was on the list of like the very short list if we're trading up. The other guy I know that they were interested in was Johnny Furphy was the other one.
Yeah,
but he was gone before then. I think wasn't he the first pick in the day 2 or second pick in day 2 or something like that?
He was one of the first picks, I believe.
He was gone before 37. Yeah, but he was gone before their pick.
Yeah, I believe the Pacers made a trade with someone and they got him somehow, which, I mean, Pistons fans get to see him 4 times a year. So, I mean, there's that.
Yeah, right.
But, I mean, that kid is just a hard-nosed player. I mean,
yeah,
Pacers are just they're going to be good for a really long time.
Yeah, they're doing it well, and they got to get Tyrese to play some defense. Once they can get him to be passable, I think they'll be scary for a while. I agree.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I thought Pistons could have went after Obi, but he re-signed today, so I was like, damn.
Yeah, that'd been a good one
for sure. I did want to get into the trade that the Pistons did make recently. It was for Tim Hardaway Jr., which, again, if people subscribe to your podcast, they probably would have known that this was a possibility, because I remember listening to your podcast. Say, don't be surprised if this happens. Yeah. So I wanted to kind of get your initial reaction to this trade. Do you think it was a good trade for the Detroit Pistons?
I don't think it was a bad one. Do I think it was a good one? That will determine what Quentin Grimes' knee situation is like, how Quentin Grimes impacts winning in Dallas. I like Quentin Grimes. I like the idea of Quentin Grimes. I like what Quentin Grimes did his second season in New York. But he struggled to play his last year in New York. He obviously came to Detroit injured and only played in 6 games and really only had one good offensive game in those 6 games. I think it's easy to people to forget, like most front office guys who come in don't value players the same way that the previous guy did. And I think that's probably a sign of that. But listen, Tim Hardaway is a guy who, first of all, they did the trade for the picks more. They're getting 3 seconds, one of which could be literally the first pick or in day 2 or the 5th pick in day 2. Like, it's going to be a top 7 day 2 pick, in my opinion, because I don't think the Raptors are going to be very good. So that's not a bad pick. And you see how the CBA has affected teams. I mean, listen, AJ Griffin was had for the 44th pick. So you could easily package 2 of those and move into the first round. And I think fans would, it looks a lot better if it's like the Pistons traded Quentin Grimes for Tim Hardaway Jr. and the 24th pick in the 2026 NBA draft, right? But it's basically equivalent to that. But I also understand the group who's like, I'd rather see what Grimes provides. And he's younger, has more upside, better defender than Hardaway, has had good shooting seasons. I'm not going to discredit Hardaway's consistency for 10 years or whatever it's been now. But I think it was important for Detroit, one, to get somebody who's a consistent shooter, to get an expiring contract to go with the picks, but also Tim Hardaway Jr. plays. Not to say, and this isn't a knock at Quentin Grimes, this is a knock at a lot of the players the Pistons have acquired in many years. Like, that's aside from lack of star level power, lack of 3-point shooting, right up there is the lack of availability. Guys are always hurt on this team since I've been covering them in 7 years. And Tim Hardaway Jr. has played in 70 plus games in 4 of the last 5 years. So you're getting a high volume, league average 3-point shooter who's always available to play. He was terrible in the playoffs, was a no-show in the finals. but he also averaged 14 on good 3-point shooting in the regular season. So I like the trade. I think it puts a complimentary piece around Cade, but it also helps replenish the cupboard. And I think people should remember they hear seconds, and there's no value in seconds. Well, I would argue, one, like I said, the new CBA teams are going to move into the second round as opposed to the late first. Two, when you make a trade, you have to trade something back. So that's why seconds are valuable. Like if a team wants to salary dump a first and a player to the Pistons do have to trade something back. So if you have extra seconds, that's something you can just throw in there. So there is value there.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of seconds, and this is probably like a really bad example, but Jay Crowder was traded for 5 second-round picks from the Milwaukee Bucks, and for whatever reason, Mike Budenholzer never played him, which is actually kind of hilarious. Yeah. But you can get a pretty good player. I mean, wasn't Sadiq traded for 5 second-round picks?
He was traded for 5 second-round picks. I mean, listen, we even said AJ Griffin was traded for the 44th pick. I know he had a bad year last year, but it's a guy who shot 40% from three as a rookie and is only 20 years old. Like, that's just where we are in the league with the financial constraints. Teams are going to have to make decisions like that.
Yeah, I honestly wasn't too upset with this trade. Some Pistons fans, which I like Quentin Grimes as a player, liked him coming out of college. Mm-hmm. But you would think we just traded a 3-time All-Star. Like they were really upset with this trade. I'm like, you guys, like he's had injury histories, he's
the part that got me because he only played 6 games here. And the attachment I saw was a little nuts. But I also understand that the Pistons, for all they haven't done, what they have done is done a good job of attracting a younger fan base through drafting like Cade, through rebuilding guys like Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart. Like they brought in more young fans, bringing back the teal jerseys. So a lot of young fans see this young player and they get attached. I understand that. But like I said, I'm a fan of Grimes. I think there's a good player there. But I also don't think this wasn't like fair value for Quentin Grimes.
Yeah,
I think it was pretty fair value.
I like it for Dallas. Like I think it makes sense for Dallas. I mean, you get to play in a kind of maybe a lessened role than you would in Detroit, and you get to play with Luka and Kyrie. I think it makes sense for them, and I think for Detroit, to your point, they addressed something that they didn't do last year, and that was 3-point shooting. They did not make a lot of threes, and Tim Hardaway Jr., to your point, has been very consistent.
And availability. Joe Harris and Monte Morris didn't play because of injuries.
Yeah, I mean, I saw some Pistons fans compare this to a Joe Harris trade too. I was just
that's
like,
wild.
That's no, like
that's wild. That's different. He's not coming off a major. What did Joe Harris have? Didn't Joe Harris
calf.
like a major calf injury, like missed a whole season or something like that? Tim doesn't miss games.
Yeah, I like the trade, and I mean, I had heard, I don't know if it's true that Cade's camp really liked Tim Hardaway Jr. That was a player that Cade wanted to play with. Which, I mean, I don't know if for that to be true, but I mean, I know Cade did talk to him about his surgery, like prior to having the surgery, of like kind of like guidance to that. So there is something there.
Yeah, I don't know if that was like a player that like Cade went and pounded the table. We have to have this guy, but yeah, I wrote the story talking to Cade where he told me that Tim Hardaway was the last person. Once Tim Hardaway told him about the shin surgery, he had the same one. He's like, once he told me that and what we talked about, like that made me feel good about it. So there is a relationship there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I thought it was a pretty good trade. Trajan did exactly what he said he was going to do.
Yep.
And he took on a contract, a 1-year rental, if you will, to get a guy that can be an immediate impact. So I honestly like the trade.
Yeah, you could make the case that, you honestly could make the case that they upgraded the player for the short term and still kept financial flexibility for next year too. So you potentially improve the team next year while giving yourself an opportunity to rebolster the roster a year from now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate the trade. I don't know if you can answer this question. If not, that's fine. We can go on to the next question. It was a question about Ausar. I wanted to know if he's going to be playing in summer league.
So I'll say this: I've been told that he's doing great, and there is like great news there. Like I think if the season started soon, like he would. I don't want to say that because I don't know that for a fact. I know I've been told that he's doing great, and there's like great news there. I was also told that he probably won't play in summer league.
Okay. I know a lot of fans have been asking about like the blood clot situation, which I understand from a fan perspective, but honestly, it's good to hear that he's doing better. But like I said, we can just kind of move on to the next topic because I don't want to make this like a whole thing.
Yeah, no, I know I've heard that he's doing very well. I saw him at the combine; he was doing great. Talked to him. I don't think he's playing summer league, but I don't think it sounds like to me he's not in jeopardy to miss training camp or anything.
Okay, like I said, it's good to hear that he's doing well. I did want to talk to you about you wrote a really good piece over at The Athletic. For people that haven't checked it out, you definitely should. And that was your NBA free agency big board. So I had without kind of giving too much out of the article, out of your top 10, who do you think it would be the most realistic for the Pistons?
Tim Hardaway thing kind of throws a monkey wrench in. I thought Gary Harris would have been a good target. I don't know if you do that now, unless there's a move to follow. But you look at it. You look at Najee Marshall. They could use another wing. You look at Malik Beasley, guard wing hybrid. That's an elite 3-point shooter. You could use him. You look at Isaiah Hartenstein. Do they want to invest in the center right now? Like that's a question, but they have the money to do it. Those are the names to me that like Tobias Harris, like I think is a legitimate possibility. I know there's some fans out there that think he's getting the max. He's not getting the max. If I had to predict, Tobias will get somewhere between 18 to 23 a year. If I had to predict, which is fair.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to do 2 for 40 for Tobias, I think it would be a steal, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that is good value. People forget, like I know he was bad in the playoffs, but he's been a literal, like legit NBA starter for many, many years, and he was a legit NBA starter this year during the regular season. Pistons aren't worrying about making it to the finals. Like Tobias is still a very good regular season player, and he's always available. Another guy that's always available to play. Yeah,
I mean, I had a podcast earlier last week, and I said if you can get him between like 15 to the 20ish range, I think that's good value. If you go anything higher, then that's where I kind of like have my questions of like what the long-term goal is. But to your point, I think he's still a really good NBA player. I mean, 17-6, available, can score at all 3 levels, would provide even more floor spacing with this team next to Cade. Honestly, like Tobias, there was one guy in there that you had, and it was Luke Kennard.
Oh, yeah.
So kind of given, like you said, Tim Hardaway Jr. kind of threw a monkey wrench in that. Would Luke Kennard be a player that maybe they try to look to bring in, given that I believe his team option or his player option got declined, or I think I read.
Yeah, it did. I forgot who reported it, but it looks like they were trying to work out a different deal. So maybe like a 3-year, $30 million where he just gets longer years. The Pistons can offer that and more. Luke likes Michigan. His family liked Michigan. He would be very much a player that they need. And to get fans' hopes up even more, where did he go to college, Anthony?
Duke.
Where did Trajan go to college?
Duke.
So you never know. You never know. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened, but it did sound like they were working to get something done between Memphis and Luke. They just kind of restructured the deal, but you never know. Pistons come in and offer $2 or $3 million more, and maybe that's an alternate route as opposed to spending $15 million on Malik Beasley or whatever it might cost.
Yeah, I mean, well, to Malik Beasley's point, his mom's actually from 7 or 8 Mile, I believe.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. That's right.
Yeah.
I remember reading that a few years ago. Corey might have told me. Yeah, Corey might have told me too. That's right.
Yeah, Corey told me that he was doing a photo shoot for Malik Beasley when he was in Denver. And he's like, yeah, my mom's from like 7, 8 Mile. So there's some Detroit ties there as well with Malik Beasley.
That's dope. I didn't know that. Yeah, I mean, listen, he checks a box, and There's options. That's why I was kind of getting a little frustrated with everybody's like, they got to draft a shooter. No, I can name 6 or 7 average to good 3-point shooters off the top of my head in free agency. And that's not even trades. So there's shooters out there. As long as they get them, then they're fine. But there's options out there.
There definitely is. So my biggest question on this team is still rim protection.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Nick Claxton got re-signed. Isaiah Hartenstein, I don't know if the Knicks have enough money. I don't know. NBA salary cap seems like a myth. All the free agent signings that they've made, like OG. Do you think a Hartenstein would be a realistic option for the Pistons if they want to get a little bit more rim protection?
I think so. What I also think could be a possibility is if the Knicks are really dead set on bringing Hartenstein back, maybe do you trade Mitchell Robinson and a pick to the Pistons, and the Pistons help you facilitate getting Isaiah Hartenstein? Obviously, in terms of Mitchell Robinson, you want him to play more. He's often injured, but if it comes back with their first round pick back, I think you can live with it. So I definitely think there's things to watch there. Even Jonas Valanciunas is somebody I would even pay attention to. Dwayne Casey and Trajan all have relationships with him. Maybe even JB. JB might have been with him a year in Memphis too, if I'm not mistaken. The year JB coached in Memphis, I think Jonas might have been there.
I believe so. Yeah, I think you're right.
So, I mean, listen, it all kind of depends. This all comes down to how they view Duren, and how Trajan views Duren, and I'm not sure how that is, but I do know that they want to improve the rim protection, whether that's going to get somebody or improving it internally. So they have to ask themselves which one's more realistic, and maybe we'll find that answer out in the next few days. But I don't think Hartenstein's a reach. They have the money to do it, but I also could see a world where, they maybe get some assets to take Mitchell Robinson so the Knicks can take Hartenstein and they do like a sign and trade or something like that. But I think even Jonas Valanciunas, who isn't like a athletic rim protector, Stu has told me before, like when he plays Hartenstein or when he plays Valanciunas, his chest is like red. Like that's one of the more physical guys. Like you feel Valanciunas when you're playing against him, and didn't shoot the ball great from 3 last year, but he's had some decent 3-point shooting season. Like he's at least a threat to space the floor. I don't know if he's always guarded, but he can make some of them. Just a smart player, like the type of player they need to if they're trying to like integrate some veterans with some youth. So something to keep an eye on. But certainly I think like they have the money for Hartenstein. I just don't know if they want to commit that much money. I don't know where their love for Hartenstein is to commit that much money.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you get over the $100 million conversation, I think that would be like a really hard sell.
Yes,
probably. But I mean, I like them. There's one center that I've had my eye for like a long time, but I don't know if it's like even an option. Like I really like Zubac out of LA.
Yeah. He's a good option. What's Atlanta doing? Capella has 1 year left. Just take a year of Capella and then figure it out again after that. But there's options out there again too with that. It's just how creative they're going to get.
Yeah, I mean, I know the next like 2 hours or so is just going to be when it does hit at 6. I think everyone's just going to be on their phone scrolling, waiting for those notifications. Like, I can already see it.
It's going to be a very interesting night. I think I wouldn't be surprised if we get a big I don't want to say a big trade, but like if we get like some decent trades, as much as the signings aren't going to be that exciting. Like there's nobody other than Clay. Paul's going to do meetings, so we're not going to hear Paul George's decision tonight. But I think there could be an interesting trade or two.
Yeah. So Marcus wants to give you a shout out watching live on Facebook. Says that he sees all your tweets. You're his first go-to for Piston news. So shout out to Marcus.
Marcus, I appreciate you, big dog. Thank you.
Yeah, people love you here, man. Got almost 1,300 people in here. Just they're here for you, not for me. I guarantee you.
No, they're here for you, man. They wouldn't tap in if they didn't like you.
It's like 50-50. Some days they like me, some days they hate me. They blame me for the Ron Holland pick because they did a podcast with Zarek last week, and I said I think it's gonna be Ron Holland. He's like,
I saw you called that. That was good.
Yeah.
It made sense. I just knew he hadn't worked out. So he fits the archetype of what Trajan likes. Like I said, I knew he hadn't worked out. So I didn't consider it, but now we know. Now I'm aware of why that was the case, and also Trajan keeping stuff close to the vest.
Yeah, it sounded like a strategy from his presser saying like, yeah, I wanted it to be like that. I didn't want these agents talking to each other saying like, oh, he worked out in Detroit, they're going to draft him.
Yeah, this is to me what it was, and from what I've been told, the reason they struggled to get draft prospects in is it wasn't because they're in limbo or because of the record last year. It's because, especially in a weak draft class like this, all these agents are trying to get their players to places where they can play. And Detroit has young players 23 and under at every position. So if I were an agent, I too would not want my client in a weak draft class to go to Detroit and sit behind somebody his age or a year or two behind, right? Like I think that was the primary reason from what I've been told.
Yeah. Honestly, like I saw some of the pre-draft workouts reported by like Hoops Hype, and it was like TJ Salong and Jacoby Walter. Like didn't even see Ron's name on the list, which I was like, okay. I mean, like it happens. I mean, guys get drafted all the time, and like they don't even like work out for the team. So I mean, it's not like impossible. Like ESPN was trolling though that night, man. Like they had the camera pointed at Donovan Clingan. I was like, okay, we're taking Clingan, and then they went to Ron Howland. I was like, okay, what the hell's going on, man?
I'm sure. Yeah, I now that you said that, I do remember. This was the first year I wasn't at the draft. I decided to watch it at the PPC with the other beat writers, and so we could talk to Trajan after. But yeah, I think we all were very curious who it was going to be up until, the final seconds.
Yeah, same here. Like I had no idea. I have one more question for you because I know you got to get out of here and get ready for free agency, and that is Cade Cunningham and extension talk. So I know you had reported a couple of times that it's likely he's going to get an extension. What would you say kind of like a ballpark figure is? You think it'd be closer to a Tyrese Halliburton extension or like a LaMelo Ball?
I have to have the numbers in front of me. I think Cade gets as close to the, what is LaMelo's again? Is it 212?
I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the difference between the two. I would imagine it's probably closer to LaMelo's. I mean, just because Tyrese did have, has had like a success in terms of team success, and that's not Cade's fault, right? There's just a little bit more leverage there. But I think he's going to get whatever. I actually think he probably gets the max, whatever the max is. From my knowledge, I think he gets the max. It's going to get done. I wouldn't be surprised if it's within the next 48 hours. I have it on good authority that there was interest on both sides to get something done.
Yeah, so they say LaMelo's was 5 years, 260. So
and Tyrese was what?
Let me see. I think Tyrese's was closer to like 300 million, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, but I think they had like built-in incentives. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Well, Tyrese's was 245, with incentives.
Yeah, so Cade will get he'll be there, like around both of them. Yeah,
like in that ballpark of 245 to 260. I mean, I think you should lock him down while you can. I mean, I don't know if you've heard local radio here. Like, there's been some crazy talk of trying to trade him for Keldon Johnson to the Spurs. Like,
who said that?
Mike Valeni.
Just Cade for Keldon Johnson and a pick or two.
Yeah, he thinks the Spurs would throw 3 or 4 first for Cade Cunningham for Keldon Johnson straight up. I mean, hey, that's his opinion. That's their opinion. I'm not gonna say they're crazy, but I mean,
this is my thing. I just don't. Lottery luck hasn't worked out in their favor. Why not try to build a team around Cade first before you do that? Like, they haven't even tried that first. The guy just put up all-star numbers playing on a 14-win team. I think they'd benefit from trying to put continue to put more. They have some good players. Put more good players around him and see what it looks like then before making a decision like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably the best draft pick since Grant Hill, in terms of just fringe all-star numbers.
Oh yeah, if you're going off that, yeah. I was gonna say KCP just because he's been a value in terms he was picked 7th, has been a starter on multiple championship teams. You can make the case arguably the most important role player in the last 4 or 5 years in the NBA, if not 1, 2, or 3 or 4. But yes, in terms of star power, yeah, it's Cade.
Yeah, I mean, if you would have told me KCP was a 2-time champion like 10 years ago, like 20-year-old me would have been jumping up and down. But
yeah, no, hey, listen, if people forget, you can make the case KCP was the second best player on that Lakers title during the bubble. He was ridiculous during that run. Shout out to KCP. It's curious to see if he'll come back.
I saw reports that the Pacers might try to make a run at him, which I don't know where the money's going to come from, but I mean, I would hate seeing KCP in the same division 4 times a year. I really would.
It'd be interesting. If he wants it back, Detroit can give him one.
For sure. One prediction from you. How many, not how many, what position do you think they target first in free agency if they do even decide to use their cap space in free agency?
Forward.
Okay.
A 3 or 4. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a forward. No.
Najee Marshall, Tobias Harris.
Do you think they still go after Najee, even though they drafted Ron and they have Ausar and all those guys?
I think so. I think they call. Yeah, I think they call.
Yeah.
Can't have too many of those guys, as New Orleans showed. The more the merrier.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Dorian Finney-Smith gets traded. I think that's a guy that they could go after possibly if they want to.
Yep, I think that's another one. DeAndre Hunter, don't love his contract as much, but that's another one. Yeah, there's options, man. It's very curious to see how creative Trajan gets.
For sure. Well, I know you're strapped for time. You're busy. The fact that you came on like right before free agency, you're goated for that. I appreciate you. So
I promised you a few days ago, so I didn't want to renege.
You know what? I would have understood. Like, I get it. Like, I work so much. I didn't even I laughed. They're like, yeah, free agency starts at 6. I was like, oh, does it? Like, damn. But yeah. I do appreciate you coming on. Appreciate all 1,400 people in here. If you want to plug your podcast, plug whatever you're working on at The Athletic, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, go check out The Athletic. Subscribe if you haven't already. I think there's a $1 subscription going on. So just go to my Twitter at JL Edwards III. Click on one of my stories, and it'll send you to the $1 subscription deal. If you're there and you haven't heard about my new podcast, I have a podcast, The Detroit Players, with Detroit native Vincent Goodwill, who is a senior NBA columnist for Yahoo Sports. He actually just came back he was on a hiatus as he was covering the playoffs and the finals. I had Laz Jackson on, who I'm sure your listeners are familiar with. But Vinny just came back. We just dropped an episode today. We record every Sunday. We usually drop on Monday, and then depending on news, we'll do one more during the week. I always, if there's no news, I'll drop something on Friday, whether that's a short thing for me or an old interview with a player or press conference that you maybe didn't hear in its entirety. I'll just upload it. But the main podcast is on Mondays, and then I call it the bonus episode on Fridays, but that kind of varies depending on news. So yeah, check me out at The Athletic first and foremost, and then from there, go to Patreon and check out the Detroit Players.
For people that do want to check out your podcast, I put a link in the description, and there's a link at the top of this chat. So you click on it, it takes you straight to Patreon. I actually like listening to the podcast for Patreon versus Apple and Spotify. It just sounds better for whatever reason. I don't know what it is. Okay. Yeah, I think the audio sounds better to me personally, or maybe it's just my headphones. Who knows? But
no, interesting.
I did listen to your podcast this morning because it was kind of like an emergency podcast. Liked it. I forgot what Vinny's voice sounded like for a little bit because I got used to Laz for so long. But I appreciate you coming on, man.
Of course.
As always, you guys that are listening, appreciate you guys, and we'll see you guys next week. Peace.